Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. So I thought I'd get on today and for my third video ever actually give you guys my timeline, my history in terms of my health, experiences, everything that's kind of made up my experience in life between physical, mental, emotional health, all that stuff that I feel is really relevant to the journey that my husband and I are now on and that we're going to be documenting on this channel, because I think it's just going to hopefully not confuse you, but also just give you an insight into my world and how, it's all come to be. So everything I'm going to share with you today, I'm going to try and keep it concise, because who wants to sit here and listen to some, chick's life story? But I do want to keep it relevant, and anything that I do say will be relevant. I just have to make sure that I bring it kind of full circle and bring it back to what we are trying to achieve here and document within our journey. So with all of that said, let's hop to it. So my life was kind of pretty cruisy, I guess you could say, up until I was about probably 8 or 9, which is when I started experiencing some pretty hectic allergies. So gluten intolerance, or really a gluten allergy, came on really hard and fast. And it was probably to do with my eating patterns at that time, because I have heard of a lot of people who overdo it on one kind of food source and then wind up with some kind of intolerance to it. I've seen it with family, with best friends, all that kind of thing, whether it be alcohol or like strawberries. If you are going to live pretty much on that type of food, then you can get an intolerance to it. So the gluten was the thing for me. I used to overdo the pasta, the lasagna. Obviously I was 8, so I was just kind of eating what I was given and had access to, and a lot of that was either leftover dinners, which did contain a lot of carby, gluten-filled foods. I had cereals, and then my main staple was bread. So I do remember that for a long time I was eating 2 pieces of toast, then 2 pieces of bread, obviously for a sandwich at lunch, and then I come home after school and eat 2 pieces of toast for afternoon tea. Now that became a huge problem, because throughout the day after lunch I was noticing I was just so bloated, so completely bloated. Then I'd come home and I'd still have the bread in the afternoon, but at 8 or 9 years old, you're not really understanding that it's the bread. There's no correlation there that there's something wrong. It's just you feel sick and you don't quite know what to do about it. Well, I soon discovered that the way to fix it was with a massive, and I'm talking like a litre of milk of an afternoon. I would come home and make myself my toast and my litre of milkshake. Now, we did have free reign growing up. I'm not passing any blame onto my family here. We had 2 very hardworking parents, and so being the eldest, I just, took initiative, looked after my sisters, and, would look after myself and just help myself. But I didn't make any correlation to what was going on. So for a good couple of years, I had this awful relationship with gluten. And then because I knew that the litre of milk was going to give me diarrhea, I'd make the 1 litre milkshake. It sounds absolutely horrendous in hindsight, but I honestly had no idea what was going on. The problem, of course, then, as you can imagine, I was in discomfort all the time. I was bloated, I was constipated, and that's actually when incontinence came into play for me. Stress incontinence. I couldn't laugh, or I would honestly lose my entire bladder. It was horrendous. So it added to what was already happening for me, which was being very, very badly bullied. I was in a Catholic school, and it just went from bad to worse as I got bigger, wanted to do less things, obviously quite grumpy too, and then that actually became fairly violent. So this was all kind of tumbling together and culminating by the age of about 10. Now I'm going to tell you this next part. It might be triggering for some people, but it did happen, and it is a major, major pivotal point in my life, which I feel may have some kind of attachments on like this emotional, spiritual, mental aspect level. that is relevant to the journey that's going to be happening here in terms of looking for other ways to treat physical symptoms on more of an energetic or a deeper mental emotional level, basically, which is something that I have dedicated myself to for quite a long period of time. And obviously life gets in the way, things get bad again, and then I come back to it. So what that event was when I was around 10 was that I was sexually harassed in a church by an old man and assaulted across about a semester. In my mind it feels longer, but I believe it was about 10 to 20 weeks, so 2 terms in Australia. And it was all happening in church. The school that I was at was attached to the school, so he'd be jeering at me from the fence when we weren't at Sunday Mass. And then all the while I'm having these food allergies going on, I'm in massive amounts of discomfort, and I'm being extensively bullied. Within the same time period, so creeping now towards 11, well, actually, no, it was within the same time period because it all came up with this old man, was that I had to have an operation. So with all the weight I was carrying, I still loved dancing, but I wound up with toxic ingrown toenails and wound up having to have an operation. They butchered me, and the old man would use that as a way in, complimenting me on my butchered toenails. Really awful, awful, awful. And of course, another reason why I was being bullied, right? So that's all happening. And then shortly after I got back into dancing, I had a really bad fall and I broke my tailbone and just really buggered my back basically for the rest of my life. So I changed schools for my last year of primary school, went to the local public school, one of the best years of my life. But of course, first day I'm being shown to my new room and I'm blowing up the donut cushion, and I just have memories of that and thinking I'm just gonna be bullied all over again. And whilst it was funny to some people, like we just got on with it, you know. I only had to blow up that donut cushion for my broken tailbone for a few weeks, and then mostly everyone was good with me from there. But that is a very pivotal part that I feel of my experience as a child, and to be exposed to that kind of the bullying, you know, the pedophile, you know, all that kind of thing. It's something that has stayed with me, and I think it definitely has shaped and played a role in the issues I've had throughout my life in terms of worth. And there's definitely a question mark for me right now as to whether or not those things have attached to the issues that I have now. So the continued back problems, an extra part I should add to the old man side of things is that a lot of it was to do with around my breasts. So again, very triggering, not lovely. But that's gonna play a role then in what I feel has maybe emotionally attached to me now that I'm a mum and that breastfeeding journey, and that's all kind of coming next. So fast forward, we go into high school, still overweight, still experiencing these gluten intolerances, the incontinence, and then finally at 15, my mum is diagnosed with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. We check my thyroid, it's full of nodules, and I too am diagnosed. But the problem with that is we then embark on a journey of mum's probably had her Hashimoto's for a long time and it's been untreated. Mum pretty well went to having her thyroid out straight away. They didn't want to take mine. So I've been on this Hashimoto's roller coaster now pretty much since I was 15, and I'm 30 this year. So that added on to everything that was going on is just insane, because it's the one thing in my life that hasn't kind of stayed the same, or at least slowly gotten better. It's erratic all the time. And then kind of further along from there, sometimes I can get my metabolism to work with me, not against me, so I'm not putting on weight or maintaining or slowly putting on. I then was able to lose a lot of weight, was really happy kind of around this time in my life, until I was hit with chronic fatigue and just total mental strain. for my final year of high school. Now, I should probably mention this too, because I think it will come up later, is that I had a vaccination. I had the first round of vaccinations for the cervical cancer stuff. That all happened at the end of high school. And then shortly after that, I pretty much just fell into a depression pit with chronic fatigue, with all of this stuff going on. So that aspect will come into it a little bit later. Really tough time in my life from there on, end of high school. My parents split. I split with my longtime high school boyfriend, who kind of isn't relevant until now. And yeah, basically stuffed around until I was around 21 and moved up here to Newcastle, where I currently reside, to go to university and study in the field that I now run my other business in online. And which is great, because when you have chronic fatigue, when you have thyroid disease that obviously brings on that fatigue, back problems, extensive back problems that have now been re-aggravated by the birth trauma, which I'll get to, it's amazing to be able to work from home. Hard, but amazing, and also even better when you have a baby. After that, I went to university exchange for my middle year of university, 3 years at uni. And when I came back, I've always been hyper vigilant with being really, really careful with like sexual partners and all that jazz. And I had my pap smear probably like 2 or 3 months late. So this is back when it was every 2 years. And I was diagnosed with like SIN3 pre-cervical cancer cells, which was absolutely horrifying. I don't want to get into vaccinations in this video because I'm actually pro-vaccine. I just think I was really unlucky, but I will talk a bit about that later when I do say like a women's health kind of video, particularly with my experiences. But that sucked. Let's say that sucked. I just met my husband too, so because it was HPV, obviously didn't want to have a sexual relationship whatsoever. But he married me, so it must have been worthwhile hanging out for, which is really nice. And very shortly after the operation, I got in within like 8 or 9 weeks because of how far advanced these pre-cervical cancer cells were. Yeah, got in, came out, recovered really well. In recovery, most of the girls were my age, so I'll let you draw some of maybe the same conclusions I've had there. And then from there, I actually moved in with my hubby, and it's been back then to a bit of a roller coaster between the chronic health, between the Hashimoto's, the fatigue, the food allergies. I had really bad adult acne again at one point. And then things started kind of getting strange with downstairs. So something was happening with my ovulation, having really strange periods, and then like the weight issue, just a serious yo-yo of, you know, the metabolism working okay and then not working so well. All the while between this kind of time period, I have started exploring like energy work, like theta and pranic healing, Reiki, like literally anything that was potentially going to help me. And I can honestly say that all of it did. It honestly all did. And I do question myself as to why I didn't go back. I actually got certified. I did my beginner's certification of pranic healing, and so I do question why I didn't go back. I think the spiritual aspect for both me and my husband actually around the same time before we met each other, was deep. A few years, between meeting me and finishing high school was also deep in a spiritual journey himself. So talk about meant to be. There's a lot of meant to be's and kismet in our relationship. But yeah, exploring the energy aspect of things. I've obviously had, without saying it, fairly consistent traditional counselling and therapy throughout my life too. So there has been a mix of, I want to say, Western and alternative, modalities, I guess you could say, and treatments that I have explored throughout my life. I've seen endocrinologists, I've obviously been to nutritionists and naturopaths, energy healers, like counselors, psychologists, literally everyone. You name it, I've been there, I've tried it, I've done it. I've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get to the end of this. I've even been to a weight management clinic, which I completely forgot to mention back when I had the 15-year-old Hashimoto's diagnosis. I went with mum. And that was quite successful too, but we were receiving shots of B12, nothing sinister, and on a very high protein, low carb diet. So I do know that playing with food for me has worked, but I also know that I can't not exercise. There's actually it's very imbalanced for me with my thyroid that I need to either be killing myself exercising for 2 hours a day to get anywhere. I was on the rowing team during university when I was particularly well, before I went to America and came back and had the pre-cervical cancer diagnosis. And I was very, very, very fit, but I was also heavy set. I had legs like a footballer because my thighs were just massive. I was so muscly. I wasn't a lean rower at all, and I believe that that's just purely because I'm a stocky built person, and I just potentially always will be. I'd like to say I won't be, but you know, genetics, DNA, you look at my family, you can see the body shape, you can see what there is, and then you can obviously, with love and respect, see the people who've let themselves go, and then see the people who've really tried to look after themselves. There really is this shape that comes through genetic wise. So I've been there. I've tried literally everything that you could throw at me. And so, yeah, I hope that gives you a good background of what has happened to get you to from when I met my husband to kind of now. And this is probably relevant just to put in there too, between that diagnosis, finishing university, and then starting my online business a couple years ago, more creepy men just, I don't get it. I feel like there is a lesson in this that I am hopefully learning, but they followed me into the workplace. And that was pretty much, I got my dream job out of university as a junior graphic designer, doing more kind of admin related work as well, like a dual graphic designer, admin related person. And within that 3-month trial period, started getting sexually harassed by one of the top salesmen. Like I feel like as a woman, I genuinely can't win. But that's a theme in my life that has constantly kind of repeated itself too, right? And so that's going on in the background. We thought, you know, this issue with men and why I am being taken advantage of in that way. Am I too nice? Why are people being inappropriate towards me? The relationship stuff was a mess before I met my husband, but fortunately I did meet him and he is incredible, utterly incredible. My other half in so many different ways, very different, but also with the same kind of goals and interests. And so I think that's what makes us work, because I'm the airy fairy, you know, living up in the dreams in the sky kind of thing, and he kind of grounds me and pulls me back to earth and helps me to be a little bit calmer, a little bit more realistic, and to just slowly take on things, because I'm very good at burnout too. So after the work stuff kind of blew up, I started my own business. You know, so many doubts of not enoughness, chronic fatigue flare-ups again, Hashimoto's all over the place. We get married, and then it comes time to start thinking about having the baby. And we started on this expedition of trying to lose weight. So I did the low carb, low calorie thing again. So no exercise, wound up losing probably half the body weight that I wanted to lose. So around 12 kilos. And by some miracle, because that entire year, so for 8 months, we'd been trying to find when I was ovulating each month through a blood test, and it just wasn't working. And then by some miracle, I can absolutely pinpoint it. I fell pregnant within 2 days of my period finishing, which is just insane. Like, that's not when you meant to ovulate, right? And it's not like we were having unprotected sex either. That was the one time. And so I was using the Flow app to track. And so you're meant to have, even though I have an irregular period, you know, it's generally that midway point between when your period starts and then when the next one's meant to start. It's generally in the middle. And I was having short 3.5 day periods. So to ovulate 5 days after my period technically started was kind of just insane. So this opportunity kind of came up and we did the deed unprotected, and what do you know? I was pregnant. So even my doctor was absolutely flabbergasted because we'd spent the entire year up until that point thinking that I had polycystic ovaries, that I was ovulating on my period, that I potentially had some weird form of endometriosis because I'd been on the pill and then the mini pill and then the depot shots and then an implant for 4 years that we just didn't know what was going on. And I think all of this adds to our experience in terms of health. I think there's a lot we don't know about. And with that said, that's why I sort of mentioned the vaccination side of things. I am pro-vaccine, but I think there's grey areas. I think a lot of Western treatments treat symptoms, obviously not talking about, you know, the implant or anything contraceptive wise, but because every body is different and, you know, different environment, different genetics, different DNA overall, different predispositions overall, you know, other diseases that have happened in the body, other illnesses that you've caught that have weakened your immune system that you just don't know, that you haven't, you know, built up, you know, your resources, you know, whatever I'm trying to say there. Everybody is different. And so to have a blanket vaccination or a blanket treatment or a blanket pill, I just have this feeling that it just doesn't quite work for everyone. And I'm a testament to that because still to this day, my Hashimoto's is not under control. This last week I've had a shocking time with fatigue kind of coming back in, and when you're a mum it's like nigh on impossible to get like anything done, particularly when you're a mum and a business owner. So yeah, it's been really, really rough. Now I don't think I've left anything out, but I guess I want to come full circle and just say this. I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be a doctor. I have tried so many things in my life. I want to be open and honest. It's a very vulnerable position that I'm putting myself in here, explaining my entire health history, because a lot of it, I mean, some of it comes down to my own ignorance, let's be honest. And then the other side of things, I mean, I'm not rich by any means, not at all. I've been a student, I've had chronic fatigue, we've been on one income for a very long time. My business, you know, is still not really in like the profit zone, like a massive profit zone. I'm still working very hard at it. And so whilst I'm privileged in other ways, I've also been at a massive disadvantage in other ways too. And so that, I guess what I'm getting at is that I just want you to see me as a real person. I don't want you to see me as someone who's a nutcase or who is, you know, trying to jam a certain ideology down anyone's throat. Really what I want to do is use this channel to document our journey, to keep us accountable, because that's the other thing too, right, is as you can see from my history, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened. There's been a lot of crap that's gone down in terms of personal experiences, in terms of chronic health conditions, and just stuff that happens that really doesn't need to or shouldn't have or couldn't have happened, you know, but has happened, and there's not much I can do about it. I mean, the other side of that is my beautiful baby girl's here. She's an absolute miracle. We were going down the path of starting a family anyway. I will do a separate video, I think, on the birth trauma related stuff, because that's actually why I originally started some way, somehow, was to explore the birth trauma and to find healing through that in the physical and the mental and emotional, which is what has kind of led me here, because we went down a total rabbit hole and have just completely overhauled our entire lifestyle to kind of cater to that kind of healing. And it comes down to not just the food, not just our way of life, not just what we're doing. I think on the micro level, when we make massive changes, then we can help the environment and the global community at large. And that's a major reason why I'm sharing what I'm sharing. So if you see any of your story in what I'm sharing, maybe something I'm sharing can help. But again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not any kind of certified physician or even energy healer or anything like that. And if something you hear helps, then by all means do your own research, do due diligence. We're all intelligent people here. Find someone in your local area who can help you explore some of these methods and modalities and, maybe treatments further. So that's me, that's my health history, and that's how it all kind of comes full circle in terms of the physical aspects and like the Western kind of treatments that I've had, and then also diving deeper and looking at the emotional connections, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that a lot of our experiences stay with us. They form our beliefs, and those beliefs form our behaviors. And I'm starting to learn that it's entirely possible that whatever was going on in my life at that time that I am triggered by in memory that has formed who I am today could be attaching itself to a physical ailment, and that's something that I really want to explore too. So I want to share that with you. Basically, that's what this whole thing is all about. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to write them down below. I am going to be doing videos that aren't as like deep and vulnerable and like just too much information in future, because I want to provide information on the specific topics. So things like the sustainable living, the energy healing modalities, the self-care, just anything I find that I feel helps in the physical, emotional, mental, lifestyle kind of realms. So I hope you find something here that serves you, and I will see you in the next video.